You are welcome to episode 2 of Transforming Our World. How a God-centered mind and heart transforms everything. Now, let's crack open the cage of big ideas and explore the forces that shape our lives, the power struggles of politics, the deep anchors of religion, the evolution of leadership, the timeless question of philosophy, and the everyday art of lifestyle. This is Yao Frimpong's network. Now we're embarking on a journey to build a God-centered mind and heart. And as mentioned earlier, this inner transformation will reshape how you think, rewrite your future, and create a ripple effect that changes your home, your community, your country, and ultimately the world. You see, when a heart and mind anchor in the divine, the ordinary erupts into the extraordinary. And this podcast is for you because you are made for the extraordinary. You see, the extraordinary shatters the fragile cage of self-obsession and worldly illusions. It grounds the soul in unshakable truth, purpose, peace, and love. And so this is not about changing your behavior, but rather it is a deep spiritual renewal that shapes your character, breathing vibrant life into a beautifully restored soul. Now, you see, when the Creator takes the hem of your life, existence blossoms into something profoundly beautiful. You no longer navigate the world in the paralyzing grip of fear, but you step boldly forward and anchored in radiant hope, so that instead of dwelling in the shadows of complaint, every breath now becomes a quiet, grateful celebration. And as you surrender to this journey, your everyday existence will now become a vibrant living offering, and together we will cultivate a deep spiritual fruit, sparking an authentic, enduring renewal that no ordinary self-help routine could ever accomplish. Now, let's join hands together to cultivate a thriving, inclusive sanctuary where every individual has the sunlight and soil to flourish. I am Desmond Teddy. Now, in the introduction of our last podcast, we saw how cultural violence, too many sins, and injustices have eroded human dignity and destabilized our social structures. Now, welcome to a new podcast series on leadership. Now, in this first episode, we kick things off by looking at infamous leaders from history and the impact they left on the world. In future, we will explore leadership in families, churches, and politics across the world and Africa. And as well, we will look at how leadership affects global racism and democracy. We will then find out the best type of leadership for our nations, our communities, and people. And now, the question is, what do you think is the best type of leadership the world needs at this moment for us to thrive as citizens of the world? What are the consequences and the rewards for good and bad leadership? These will be unrevealed. Now, if you have not done so, subscribe to the upcoming podcast for an inspiring personal and global transformation. And so now, how do we account for the devastating and interconnected consequences across our global and local communities? Who is to be held responsible for the woes and sufferings of the people in the nations of the world? And so now, if we assign a single cause for global suffering, that is a complex philosophical question rather than something with a clear-cut factual answer. And this is because human experience is shaped by many different factors and not just one. Now, throughout history, experts have said that human suffering is caused by unfair systems, corrupt leaders, limited resources, and our natural human weaknesses. But in the weight of human suffering and the catastrophic failures often point directly to the doorsteps of those in power. Please share your thoughts. Share your ideas on this. You have the right to do so. And so the question is, what is leadership and who is a leader? How do you personally define leadership? You may be a leader in the church. You may be a leader in an organization, or you may be a politician. You may be a father or a mother or a school teacher and might be playing a leadership role, which is important to your community or to your family or to your church. How do you define your leadership role? Is it to benefit yourself or the community you serve? You see, human history swings between two extremes. These two extremes are oppression and progress. And now absolute power often creates cruel tyrants. But then these dark times are always balanced by wise and visionary leaders who push humanity forward through fairness and new ideas. And historically, leadership was a top-down system where bosses gave orders and workers followed them. And while this provided clear direction, now strict rules and fear stop people from being creative and involved. So in the worst case scenario, this combination of absolute power now creates extreme beliefs that will lead to widespread human suffering. And so throughout the annals of time, now history has been scarred by the rise of catastrophic leaders who transformed the machinery of state into instruments of unimaginable suffering. For example, from Leopold II of Belgium, Idi Amin of Uganda, Pol Pot and Mao Zedong to Joseph Stalin. Now these brutal figures reshaped global history with their catastrophic worldwide terror. We must be careful of dictators, because dictators cause terrible suffering, and that is because they are greedy, they are corrupt, and often bad at leading. They use people just to gain power, leaving behind destruction. And this shows that giving one person too much power is very dangerous, and we always need honest leaders who answer to the people's problem. Now, for example, Adolf Hitler. He had the largest impact on this era. His total control over the Nazi Germany and extreme belief made him the most important figure of the mid-20th century. Adolf Hitler. He turned a divided country into a powerful world machine and started the Second World War and caused the Holocaust, which murdered about 6 million Jewish people. Cultural violence, too many sins, and injustice. And now the scripture consistently condemns leaders who abuse their power and oppress the vulnerable and wage violent wars. Therefore, the scripture says and commands, you shall not murder, you shall not kill. And now the prophetic demands to defend the oppressed. This stands in absolute opposition to the action of the Nazi regime of Adolf Hitler. Now, when we appease dictators, it leads to bigger wars, and it weakens democracy by taking away rights, or giving one person too much power opens the door to dictatorship. And history shows that when hate and bullying go unchecked, they lead into mass violence. Therefore, we must always actively protect our democracy to stay safe. Now, Idi Amin, for example, was also a cruel dictator who ruled Uganda from 1971 to 1979. He was known as the Butcher of Uganda Just think about it. And that was because his violent and unstoppable leadership destroyed the country's economy and caused deaths of up to 300,000 people. Just imagine 300,000 people. So true leaders often don't actively seek power, but rather possess the courage and responsibility to serve their community. And power without conscience is just tyranny. And so when the righteous thrive, the people rejoice. But when the wicked rule, the people groan, the people cry, they suffer. Similarly, the scripture says, woe on those who make unjust laws and deprive the poor and the vulnerable of their rights. And the hands that shed innocent blood is an abomination to the creator of our world. Idi Amin was an abomination, and it was a big disgrace to human dignity. Nations must therefore protect the rules of law. They must protect the minority rights and government checks and balances to stop dictators and dictatorship and mass violence. So the history of Idi Amin in Uganda now shows how quickly a government can be turned against its own people when this protection fails. And so when a leader removes the laws of the people and groups that is meant to stop them, they pave the way for dictatorship. By ruling by personal command instead of a constitution, Idi Amin was able to ignore the law completely. This lack of control, therefore, allowed him to carry out mass violence and killing without facing any obstacle. And what did he do? He scapegoat the ethnic and the religious groups for political or economic gain. And that when you do that as a leader, you always fail. Now, for example, when Uganda expelled its Asian population in 1972, the country lost its business and government leaders. And now giving those critical jobs to untrained loyalists instantly destroyed the economy and ruined farming and caused more violence. And now crisis help dangerous leaders to take power. And so we can stop this by using strong political rules like peaceful elections, strict time limits, and solid democratic system to protect a country from dictators. And now we're looking at another wicked leader, Pol Pot, born as Salazar. He was a dictator who ruled Cambodia in the 1970s, and his government caused the Cambodian genocide by killing up to 2 million people, about 1/4 of the country's population. Just imagine. He wanted to turn Cambodia into an extreme farming society. And so to do this, his regime now destroys cities and technology and forced millions into slave labor and murdered educated people and the minorities. The world was slow to respond. And so the world's slow response to the Cambodia genocide shows that we need a better global rules to stop mass violence early. But then, thanks be to the court, now the court-long pursuit of justice through the extraordinary chambers in the court of Cambodia proves that holding people accountable and recording history is a vital thing for helping nations heal and preventing future tragedies. The scripture also says that the human heart is deceitful evil above all things. And so humans will easily justify ourselves into believing that what we are doing is the right thing. That was exactly what Pol Pot used. He used this kind of act or self-deception to justify his horrific action. And so it is easy to see other people's fault, but we ignore our own. And because emotions and desire can trick us into thinking that our self-choices are good, we need an outside moral guide, like divine guide. We need the guidance of the creator of our world. We need wisdom. We need to reason. We need an accountability to others. to keep us in check and prevent dangerous pride. When leaders seek to rule rather than serve, the vision narrows, the bonds of trust fray, and the collective spirit shakes under the weight of self-interest. Now, another interesting leader, but wicked one, was Mao Zedong, who ruled the People's Republic of China. His extreme political goals and forced farming changes caused massive famine and violence. His strict control and brutal policies now led to the death of 40 to 80 million people, making it one of the worst disasters in modern history. Culture of violence, too many sins and injustice. Mao Zedong, his rule warns leaders of the dangers of unchecked ideology and extreme personality cults. Now, this man's consolidation of absolute power and his elevation of his little red book to sacred status like a god left the state with no mechanism to correct disastrous, politically driven policies. And this highlights the vital need for institutional checks and balances, such as independence of the judiciaries, a free press, and separation of powers. These are important to prevent tyranny and safeguard human rights. And now the scripture strictly forbids the worship of any human leader or false idols. You shall have no other gods before me. And so leaders who demand absolute power devotion, they often build dictatorship, which can lead to severe human rights abuse. And when we believe in democracy, it means that we believe that everyone is equal. And so when we worship a political leader, this breaks the rule by putting one person above everyone else. Now, this demands blind obedience, which forces us to stop thinking for ourselves. We must all learn to avoid this. Now, true leadership transforms a culture of violence into a sanctuary of peace, transmutes too many sins into a legacy of grace, and replaces injustice with unwavering equity. And now King Leopold of Belgium, who owned the Congo Free State as his personal property between 1885 and 1908. Now, this man, to get rich, forced the local people to gather rubber and ivory. And so, to force people to work and control the area, he used a private army called the Force Public. And so between 8 and 10 million people, about half the population of the Congo, died under King Leopold II. What he did was to build European wealth. And so in doing so, he forced the Congolese people into harsh labor and left them to suffer from starvation and extreme violence. And tragically, the value placed on human life fell lower than the cost of a single European bullet. Now, Leopard officers were terrified that their soldiers might use their expensive ammunition for unauthorized personal activities like hunting for food or staging rebellions. And so to control this, they issued a sick and twisted decree. That is, for every single bullet fired, a soldier had to bring back an amputated human right hand as personal proof. Now, in those days, to be honest with you, human life was valueless than a single bullet. And so to stop soldiers from wasting expensive ammunition on hunting or rebellion, officers now made a cruel rule. Soldiers had to return with an amputated human right hand that were used as currency to prove to officers that soldiers had punished those who failed. And so soldiers will now return to officers carrying glossy, bloody basket of amputated right hands of the Congolese people. That was tragic. It was tragic. And tragically, these victims were often innocent villagers, wives of men, and children of parents. And so, driven by extreme greed and cruelty, this era claimed the lives of 8 to 10 million Congolese people. Now, during this time, human suffering was ignored and lives were treated simply as numbers and lost profit. So here you see a photograph of children with amputated hands, and that was a dark reminder of the cruel and violence done under the rule of King Leopold II of Belgium. Now, the world can learn 3 lessons from King Leopold's cruel rule in the Congo. Now, first, power without limits leads to disaster. It means that when one person has total control, now greed often replaces basic human decency. And the scripture starkly concludes that the path of those who are greedy for unjust gain ultimately takes away their own lives and troubles their household. And so greed for power doesn't happen in a vacuum. Unethical behavior, financial ruin, legal trouble, or the emotional absence of a greedy provider brings chaos. It brings shame and hardship to the person's family, to the person's spouse, to the person's generation and loved ones. And again, human rights must always come first. You see, leaders and nations must never use progress or civilization as an excuse to ignore abuse and suffering. Because when you use progress or civilization to excuse abuse, it means that ignoring human rights and suffering in the name of modernization, in the name of economic growth or cultural advancement. Now, this mindset historically justifies colonization. It justifies forced labor and systematic oppression by claiming the greater good outweighs individuals' harm. The creator of our world pronounces curse on nations that birth empires through violence and neglect the afflicted. And that means that a leader's mandate is secure justice, not overlook suffering for the sake of political or economic progress. And again, profits cannot justify cruelty. And so when you exploit people and resources for wealth, it is always wrong. The scripture says, don't exploit the poor because they are poor, and do not crush the needy in court, for the law will take up their case and will exact life for life. Now, these words are a direct moral and ethical warning to leaders. They highlight the universal theme of protecting the vulnerable and condemning both economic and terrible human rights abuses. And so forcing people to gather rubber and ivory for profit shows how value money over human life destroys communities. And so King Leopold ruled the Congo Free State on his own without any rules or government limits. Now, this absolute power led to extreme greed and terrible human rights abuses. And so when you force people to gather rubber and ivory for profit, it shows how value money over human life destroys communities. Now, for years, King Leopold got away with terrible cruelties, and he pretended that he was on a helpful humanitarian mission. And this shows how much we need independent watchdogs. We need investigative journalists and reporters and global transparency to catch government when they lie or when they mislead their people. And so waiting too long to act globally shows the high cost of ignoring world problems. It proves that other countries and world organizations must step in when basic human rights and freedoms are violated or abused anywhere in the world. And now we are looking at Joseph Stalin. He is a major example of bad leadership. As a dictator of the Soviet Union from the mid-1920s to 1953, he ran a deadly and controlling government. Now, Stalin's rule caused massive suffering through violence, forced farming, and human rights violation. And so between 1936 and 1938, he led the Great Purge. The Great Purge was a type of extreme political terror. He killed or exiled anyone who dared oppose him. And so millions of people were executed or sent to the Gulag. That was a brutal forced labor camp that was used to silence critics and build up the country's industry. Cultural violence, too many sins and injustice. When leaders seek to rule rather than serve, the vision narrows. And so the bond of trust frays, and the collective spirit shrinks under the weight of self-interest. And so in the 1930s, Joseph Stalin caused a deadly famine in Ukraine that killed millions by forcing farmers onto government farms and taking all their food when they couldn't meet impossible grain goals. He also brutally controlled the Soviet Union by closing churches, killing religious leaders, and banishing millions of people to labor camps to build industries and secure borders. Cultural violence, too many sins and injustice. True leadership transforms a culture of violence into a sanctuary of peace. Transmute too many sins into a legacy of grace, and replaces injustice with unwavering equity. And then we look lastly at Unit 731. This was a second branch of the Japanese army during the Second World War, and they committed terrible crimes by performing painful and deadly tests on prisoners, including children. So Unit 731 shows why medical ethics must always come before military goals. It proves that we should never use humans as test subjects, and it is a warning about what happens when organizations put state interests ahead of basic human morality. What do you think of these bad leaders throughout history and today? Why do you think they did what they did? Could it be that some of them might have mental health issues and needed care in a psychiatric hospital? Ruthless, power-hungry leaders harming society by causing massive suffering and chaos. And so, because they destroy communities for their own selfish goal, they must be removed from power, or they must be jailed so that others learn not to repeat the same actions. Now, throughout history, leaders have consistently failed to protect, they have failed to care for and peacefully govern their people. And it seems that every type of leader in the world has let us down. Families today are struggling to lead. And so between the stress of making a living, changing social rules, and rising mental health issues, the traditional family unit is breaking down. And as a result, now children often miss out on early emotional care and important life lessons. Now, the church and community leaders have also failed, because while these failures are complex and they are caused by strict traditions, changing cultures, and human mistakes, the most disturbing issue today is the shrinking size of the church membership. And now throughout history, some powerful and cruel leaders changed the world, and they did so by issuing extreme violence, total control over their people, and strict rules. And so rulers like Leopold II, Idi Amin, Pol Pot, Mao Zedong, and Joseph Stalin caused the death of millions. Although their beliefs were different, they all used absolute power to reshape their countries. And now today, history remembers that these terrible crimes were done and it was inhuman. But their action teach us important lesson about protecting human rights and preventing leaders from having too much control. Now, looking at examples of past leaders, governments worldwide have failed, and that was simply because leaders everywhere struggle with extreme political divisions, slow decision making, and a loss of touch with everyday people. And so you see citizens feeling that their government only react to major long-term threats instead of actively preventing them. And now, tomorrow, we hold a pen that writes about the destiny of our world and the legacy of our existence. And ultimately, our faith depends on our own collective ability to reinvent these institutions, the family, the church, the communities, and the state and nations. And so, rather than waiting for a top-down rescue, now the future of global society is increasingly being shaped by people organizing to build more resilient, more inclusive, and adaptive communities. Now, what do you think? Share your views, and let's meet again in our next podcast. Thank you.